So now we are going to learn about navigating that insurance routine. And Sarah Stoney is one that is going to present next. And I just wanted to give her a quick plug real quick that she was a great moderator that hosted our Facebook Live event that was Facebook Live for Caregivers this week. And I encourage anyone who missed it to watch the video on our MDA Facebook page. It was a great session. So thank you very much, Sarah, for doing that. She is a licensed social worker who's graduated from Westchester University with a master's in social work. And she received her bachelor's degree in the same discipline in '06. She joined Children's Hospital Philadelphia's Division of Neurology in 2014. And previously, she worked in the emergency department of Penn Medicine's Chester County Hospital as a family counselor at the Lincoln Center for Family and Youth. At CHOP, she assists patients and their families navigate the complex medical system, advocates with families in their schools and throughout the community, and provides ongoing support to patients and families in the neuromuscular leukodystrophy and multiple sclerosis communities. So Sarah, thank you. I will turn it over to you, and thanks again for a great job on the Facebook event.
Well, thank you so much for that introduction. Thank you very much to the MDA for having me here today. We are going to talk about medical insurance, which can be a very mundane yet confusing and overwhelming topic. So this presentation is jam-packed. I know we're a little behind time, but hopefully if there's anything that we don't get to elaborate enough of today, be sure to reach out to me. I'm happy to speak to anyone individually if they have specific questions. So an overview for today, we are going to really focus on making informed consumers. As we'll talk about later on, being insurance literate is truly important for caring for either yourself or for a loved one with SMA, given how complex our healthcare system is. We're going to talk about some of those complexities today, including the types of healthcare insurance plans you can have. We're going to review common healthcare terminology, discuss how navigating those common insurance roadblocks work and what the processes are for those, and really hone in on why it is so important, more so than ever, with our disease-modifying medications emerging over the last few years, why to really understand and know your insurance plan is very important in the SMA community. And we will also review Social Security benefits and why it may be important for you or your loved one to apply. Next slide, please. Okay, I always include this graphic anytime I do a talk on insurance because I feel like this is actually what the inside of my brain looks like when I'm placing that call to an insurance company. Even as someone who's worked in healthcare for 10 years, the system is complicated and it's not set up to allow people to understand it easily or to really be able to have the right helpers in place. It's an extremely complicated system. So it is completely appropriate if navigating insurance issues seems overwhelming. We're going to try to attack some of that today. Next slide, please. So why is this important to talk about? So let's consider a couple questions. Think to yourself, have you or someone you care for been denied for necessary medical care? Have your co-pays, deductibles, or other medical fees caused a financial hardship? Or have you avoided calling your insurance company because you aren't quite sure what to ask? If you answered yes to any of those questions, you are not alone. Like I said, this is extremely complicated. We're going to hopefully break down some of the basics today to make you feel a little bit more empowered. And even going further, we're going to make sure that that you know which helpers in your healthcare system and program can help you. So we're going to use the term about insurance literacy. A study out of Carnegie Mellon that surveyed about 5,000 participants had noticed that about 71% of individuals surveyed were what they considered insurance illiterate, meaning that they did not understand the meaning or the definition of simple insurance terms. things like deductible or copay or coinsurance. And the reason for this, you know, and as many of you know, as either individuals living with SMA or caring for loved ones with SMA, these are not things that they teach in school. These are not, you're not taught how to navigate the complex healthcare system, regardless of whether or not you have a loved one with a medically complex diagnosis. So insurance literacy matters a lot, as mentioned here by Ben Handel from Berkeley. People who have less information end up losing quite a bit of money, sometimes thousands of dollars. It's really more important for you to know what your plan is, what your plan covers, to be able to identify medical mistakes, which we'll learn later on happens more often. Billing mistakes happen more often than you would think. Next slide, please. So knowledge is power. I remember that being written at the top of my calculus high school teacher's classroom, and he was right. So knowing information about your own health is the absolute first place to start. Because that in and of itself will help you be able to manage what the expectations are from your healthcare provider and from your insurance provider. So know who your healthcare team is and what the role is that they have in your care plan. Furthermore, if you are getting specific medical treatment, medications, or equipment from your insurance providers, know who on your healthcare team are the players that are working with your insurance company to make sure that those authorizations are done, that those appeals and denials are being done. So when you're in your doctor's appointment, if they recommend a piece of equipment or a medication, say, you know what, who's actually going to be working on that? Can I have their contact information so that they can keep me up to date as to how the process is going? Completely appropriate. Stay in touch with those people. Sign up for access to view your medical records if available. A lot of medical institutions, I know we at Children's Hospital in Philadelphia have an app called MyChop. I think it's based loosely off of the MyChart app, which is I think a little bit of a larger entity that truly puts your medical records at the tip of your fingers. You can request medical refills, you can have access to visit notes and letters. By all means, download something like that if it's available through your healthcare institution. And there's other ways to organize your medical records: binders, secure binders, USB drives, CDs, and even encrypted Google Drives. And lastly, know your insurance plan. The less surprises, the better. And hopefully after today, we'll have a little bit of a better grasp on how to interpret some of that information. Next slide, please. Okay, so we're going to talk briefly about the different types of insurance that you can have. First, the first type is commercial. So commercial insurance providers are mostly for-profit companies, even though they operate as nonprofit organizations. Policyholders pay monthly premiums to fund their policies. The amounts of the premiums and coverage amounts are designed to make a profit for the insurance company. Employer-provided group health insurance policies are considered commercial, and individuals can buy policies if they are not employed through that employer just directly from the insurance company. So you can go to bluecrossblueshield.com and buy an individual commercial plan without going through your employer. Again, you're paying monthly premiums for this commercial product. Then there's Medicaid, also known as medical assistance. It is a federal and state program, and together with CHIP insures over 72 million Americans, including children, pregnant women, parents, seniors, and individuals with disabilities. Absolutely the single largest source of healthcare coverage in the United States. Medicaid or medical assistance is also known as state insurance, and some families qualify for this type of insurance based off of their income and sometimes because of their level of disability. And we'll talk about that later when we discuss secondary insurance. And then there's Medicare. Medicare is the federal program, of course, for people over 65, and then also for younger people with disabilities. Medicare has 4 parts, A through D. Hospital insurance is part 1, which would cover admissions, skilled nursing facilities, other types of even pediatric care facilities. Part B is your medical care, so your specialists, your doctor's visits, and then C, the Medicare Advantage plans, and D, which covers prescription drug coverage. What's also not on this list that I didn't include are military insurances, such as TRICARE, which covers active duty military and retired veterans, and the VA system, of course, which our veterans have access to. If you also want to talk about the Affordable Care Act, which brought in the otherwise known as Obamacare. I often try to, it's hard to give this a type or a category. I find it somewhere between commercial and Medicaid, because when you go to healthcare.gov to try to get an Obamacare plan, you're also providing them information about your income, and they're gauging how much you have to pay as your premium based off of the income you are providing them. So it's not the same as going to bluecross.com and just paying for a premium. They are taking your income into consideration, though, but those are still considered commercial plans and still will cost you a premium to pay into. Okay, next slide. Okay, we'll quickly go through some healthcare terminology. My apologies if those viewing this know a lot of these terms. We'll go through them quickly for anyone who wants to take a screenshot or something of what you're seeing. That's perfectly fine too, to be able to look at them later on. So some questions I get the most are, you know, what's a deductible? A deductible is that covered healthcare service that you pay before your insurance starts to pay. And then the differences between an HMO and a PPO. An HMO is a health insurance plan that limits coverage to doctors that form a specific network. It generally won't cover out-of-network care unless it's an emergency. It may also require that you live or work in its service area in order for your coverage to be eligible. They provide the same integrative care as a PPO would, focuses on prevention and wellness. A PPO is a healthcare that contracts with medical providers and hospitals and physician plans to create a network of participating providers. You pay less to use those providers that are in network, but you have an option of going out of network at an additional cost. Okay, next slide. We're going to talk about secondary insurance right after this, but it's of course an insurance plan that supplements your primary insurance, whether it be a Medicaid product or another commercial product. It's just secondary to your primary, and we can talk a little bit about how you become eligible for that. A prior authorization, or also known as a pre-auth or prior auth or pre-certification, those are all plans that your healthcare team has to put in place before getting authorization on some sort of product, whether that be a medication or a piece of equipment. So if you ever talk to your healthcare provider, or I'm sorry, if you ever talk to your health insurance company and they say, oh, we actually can't authorize this yet, it needs a PA or a prior auth, that means that your doctor's office didn't do their part, and we've got to call them back to make sure that they submit the right documentation they need in order to get authorized. I'm just going to turn this light on behind me because I noticed it's a little dark. The sun is going down a little faster here in Delaware. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, and lastly, just a few more terms. A waiting period, or we'll go over pre-existing conditions or any disease or disability or condition you have at the time of application. A waiting period is typical if you're starting with a new employee. You may have a period of time that you have to stay employed before you can enroll in such plans. And then you have an enrollment period or open enrollment. So this goes for the Affordable Care Act plans and also with your employer. So there's a period of time when you can apply or modify your health insurance plan. This also includes if you have a qualifying life event. So for example, if you get married, you get divorced, the birth of a child, or you have changes to your income, all of those things can start an enrollment period where you can make those changes. Next slide, please. Okay, so talking about secondary insurance, this is probably one of the questions I get the most often is, Sarah, should I get secondary insurance? And I wish it was an easy answer, because it is very dependent on many things. For starters, if we're talking about secondary insurance in the form of a state product, that's really based on where you live and how old you are. So first we'll talk about why you would get secondary insurance. So of course, you know, many people believe 2 insurances is better than 1. If I have 2 insurance plans and they're each covering a portion, I'm going to have to pay less. That's likely absolutely true. It does not, however, and I make sure that I tell families this, it doesn't necessarily make the process that much smoother. So if we're trying to get something approved, we still have to go through the first insurance and then we have to go through the second insurance in order to get it approved. But the benefit of maybe having that extra step is absolutely usually worth it from both a financial perspective and then also from in terms of your access to medical equipment, medications, those types of things. So we talked about obtaining secondary insurance is really variable on whether the consumer is a child or an adult. Depending on where you live, a child may be eligible for medical assistance as a secondary. So for example, I work in Philadelphia and the state of Pennsylvania has a law called PH95. And that law allows our children under the age of 18 with SMA and other diagnoses to get medical assistance as a secondary insurance regardless of their parents' income. They only take the child's income into consideration. So what that means is that parents can have their children with SMA on with primary insurance and then also have the state secondary. Why that is so important and why I do make it a point to talk about that with all of my Pennsylvania families is because having Medicaid as a secondary insurance actually allows all of your medical coverage to be covered at 100%. So meaning that if you are a legal recipient of Medicaid or medical assistance, you cannot legally be billed. So I always tell families that. So if you have Medicaid, whether it's a primary or a secondary, and you receive a medical bill in the mail, there is a mistake. So go to your social worker, go back to your doctor's office and figure out what the challenge was because we can't actually bill Medicaid recipients. If you're an adult living with SMA, you may also be eligible for Medicaid, whether you qualify for either financially or if you've been approved through SSI as having a qualifying disability, then yes, you could also have Medicaid as a secondary. Medicaid isn't the only secondary insurance option. There are some adults who don't meet criteria for Medicaid, so they may choose a secondary insurance through the marketplace or through another commercial provider. Those, of course, do not hold that same standard that the Medicaid recipients do at being covered 100%, but they do offer that kind of supplemental coverage to the primary insurance. And those are commercial products that you would still pay a premium for monthly. Okay, next slide. Okay, next most common question I get is what insurance should I pick? Which is such a complicated question because it's really tough. It's a very personal decision. Every insurance company has its pros and its cons, and I truly believe that. And it's tough for an outsider or even a specific person to kind of answer that question for what works best for you or your family. If you ask the physical therapist, they may know the plan that approves physical therapy really well, and they may want you to choose that plan, or the dietitian may think that the plan that really approves the supplements the easiest is the one that you should pick, which is why it's a lot for you to weigh out and for you to decide what's best for you and your loved one. So here are some questions to consider. First and foremost, do you fit the requirements of one of the government insurance providers like Medicaid or medical assistance or CHIP? It will cost you less money, and also remember that if you're a Medicaid or medical assistance recipient, then all of your medical care is going to be covered at 100% if covered. What are your healthcare needs? What's important to you? So is it more important for you to be able to see doctors in and out of network, even if it means you have to pay a little bit more? Do you want to make sure that you have really good prescription coverage, but maybe you don't necessarily need home care coverage at this time? All of those are questions that you'll want to kind of weigh and consider. How important is your monthly payment versus how much you'll pay when you actually go to the doctor? Your premium versus your potential copay or deductible. How much is your overall out of pocket? And does the plan cover medications you're taking? Very important now, especially with all of these really exciting disease modifying medications coming out for the treatment of SMA. These are all really important questions to ask. Next slide, please. So a few other healthcare accounts, as if I wasn't already I wasn't confusing enough. One is a flexible savings account and one is a health savings account. When I first started giving talks on insurance, I finally realized that I had to figure out the difference between these two, and let me tell you, it was not easy. They're very, very similar with just a few differences. Flexible savings accounts are established by an employer. They're funded by those pre-tax payroll deduction dollars. It can be used in conjunction with any health insurance, but health insurance is also not required. So you can have a flexible savings account without having health insurance. These funds are to be used to cover medical expenses, such as deductibles, co-pays, co-insurances, as well as other medical expenses maybe not covered by health insurance. That could be acupuncture or something else that would be approved on the FSA list. However, money not used by the end of this year is forfeited. So that's important to know. So if you are offered an FSA through your employer and you're trying to figure out how much money should I have deducted every year, don't deduct too much, because if you're not going to spend it, then you will lose it by the end of the year. So it might be fruitful to sit down and kind of figure out, okay, what are my deductibles for imaging or for this procedure or for this medication every year, and kind of decide from there what your contribution would be. A health savings account is also created by an employer or it's created by an individual, but only in conjunction with a high deductible healthcare plan. Contributions to an HSA can only be made when you are an account holder and covered by that high deductible healthcare plan. Money can be used, however, without being taxed for qualified medical expenses anytime in the future, even if you're no longer with the high deductible healthcare plan that you were with when you were contributing to the health savings account. Money in a health savings account that is not used for medical expenses remains in the account and it rolls over every year. So it is not forfeited at the end of the year. Okay, next slide. So I think anytime I give a presentation on government programs or large systemic issues, we find cracks in the system. This statistic was taken before the global pandemic of coronavirus, of nearly 43 million people in the United States having medical debt. I'm sure that number is on the rise now. Medical debt can, contrary to many beliefs, damage your overall credit score. Those expenses can be reported to creditors who can report to the credit bureau. Shockingly, nearly 80% of patient medical bills contain errors. This is why the insurance literacy piece is so important. So if you have a lab done and you get letters in the mail, sometimes you get multiple of them. Sometimes you'll get something called an EOB, that's called an explanation of benefits. You'll get one that says really big, this is not a bill, and then you might get something else, and then you might get the bill. Hold on to those documentations. Make sure the numbers match. Make sure that the tests that were ordered you agreed to. Make sure that there's no errors, that nothing is duplicated, because with 80% of medical bills going out incorrectly, it is absolutely possible that you may catch something on a bill and be able to save money. And many times requests to insurance companies are denied due to simple preventable errors. Maybe the prior authorization had the wrong birthday on it, or maybe something as simple as a date is wrong, or a score is wrong on a 6-minute walk test. And those simple human errors sometimes can cause denials and the need for appeals. So it's a very broken system, which is why we empower ourselves with as much information as possible. Okay, next slide. So navigating insurance barriers, some of the ways that we go about fighting these decisions are appeals, which is a request to the health insurance company or marketplace to review the decision that denies the payment or benefit. A peer-to-peer, which is a designated period of time that the insurance company has denied a service and they want to speak directly with the physician who's requesting the service. This is usually, especially for us who work in rare disease, peer-to-peers are usually our first line of defense. We would actually rather do a peer-to-peer than do a full appeal, because when we can get a physician talking to another physician at the insurance company, explain, because SMA and neuromuscular diseases are considered rare diseases and not a lot of people understand the needs of our patients. So if we can get those two doctors talking to one another, it's usually extremely favorable in our favor. And a grievance is a formal complaint that you communicate to your healthcare insurer or plan. Grievances get reported to the state. Okay, so what else can you do? If you have medical debt, inquire about payment plans and payment forgiveness. Even if you're behind on medical bills, many medical institutions will even allow you to take a discount to make more payments. They may say, okay, let's reduce this cost by 20% so we can try to get it done. Many medical institutions will work with you. If you have a fee dispute within a hospital system, the local chapter of the American Medical Association will have a panel where you can actually file a fee dispute. And lastly, talk to people in your community. I have always said that, that the parents and the families of our neuromuscular community are by far the experts. They have been through a lot of this before, and they know how to navigate the system. Additionally, if you have a social worker on staff at your MDA care center, there are often grants and funding to help cover the cost of medical bills. Next slide. Here are some of those other people that can help you. Insurance case managers, this is their job. Their job is to assign you providers that are in network with their insurance and ensure that you are getting all of the healthcare needs that you have. If you do not have an insurance case manager, you as an individual living with SMA or caring for someone with SMA are entitled to one. So you can call your insurance company and ask them what you have to do to get an insurance case manager. Financial counselors at your physician's office or hospital, or a special needs unit, which is a Medicaid resource only. Medicaids have entire units of social workers that are just purely dedicated to help navigate challenging situations. Waiver programs, if you're enrolled in a waiver program and that's how you have access to insurance, you may have a service coordinator or somebody with a similar title that kind of orchestrates all of your care. They can also help. And like I said, of course, our awesome neuromuscular families. Next slide. So why this is more important than ever in the SMA community. So approval for specialty medications to treat SMA, which has been an amazing, huge discovery in the last few years. These decisions are determined by your insurance company. And the medications that we have been giving to our SMA patients are very costly. So that makes the insurance companies weigh the decisions even more. We, as the medical team, will do everything we can to make sure that we get the medications approved, and approved not only once, but on a consistent basis. The process of obtaining these authorizations can be lengthy, sometimes weeks to months. So again, find out who that person is in your MDA care center, who's the one that is in charge of ordering the nusinersen or the risdiplam, and make sure that they are doing the authorizations in plenty of time, and to see if they need anything from you as the consumer. What else can you do as the consumer? Number one, by far, be consistent with your medical follow-up. I can't stress this enough. With these medications costing so much money, the insurance companies ask us for very, very detailed descriptions of physical exams results from PT exams, OT exams, and if you have missed an appointment or two, sometimes the insurance company doesn't want to see old data. Sometimes they will not accept a old clinic note, so please make sure that you're up to date with all of your medical follow-up. And you can even coordinate that if you know that you have an injection coming up, or you know that you have an auth expiring soon. It may be time to say, hey, do I need to come in to get an examination to make sure that you have all the data you need to refill my next prescription? All good ideas. File and store letters from insurance providers, those EOBs I talked about, insurance approvals and denials. And if you get approvals or denials in the mail, please share them with your healthcare providers. We get them several weeks after you do. Typically, I think that they legally have to send denials out to recipients within 48 hours. So it's very likely that you will get those letters before we do. So the sooner we know, the sooner we can try to set up that peer-to-peer. We can try to get that decision overturned. And just be in communication with your healthcare providers, and definitely be accessible. If there's information that we need from you, we want to make sure we can reach you to try to get it done as soon as possible. Okay, next slide, please. So I know I'm running out of time, but I will talk quickly about the next few sections. So SSI, also known as Supplemental Security Income, makes payments to people with low income who are 65 plus, blind, or disabled. You can be eligible if you have a physical or mental illness, and payments are based on the federal benefit rate, with some states increasing payout based off of the cost of living. Next slide, please. So eligibility requirements, it's basically financial and medical. So a person can't exceed the income cap. They must have a physical or mental condition that severely limits their activities, and the person's condition must last for at least 12 months, or conditions that will result in death. A renewal process, so once, if you've applied and you have received Social Security and they determined you eligible, they will renew that, they will look at that renewal process every 3 years. This occurs even if the child's condition is not expected to improve. Regardless, during review periods, you must show proof, all of those same things you did when you initially applied, showed proof of your disability, financial records, and medical records in order to renew. Next slide, please. So this is how you apply for SSI. You apply through the Social Security Administration office by calling that number. It's actually slightly less frustrating than it was 5 years ago or so. You will call that number and ask for a phone interview. And in that first phone interview, they will go through some of the very basic requirements for SSI to determine whether or not you need to compile all the documents and come down to the office for a formal interview. As we mentioned, SSI is based on income. So if you qualify financially, they'll send you additional documentation. If your assets disqualify you, they will let you know that either you or your child are not eligible. But even if you are disqualified because of your finances, ask for the denial in writing. I tell families that because typically, if you are only denied because of how much money you make, that is truly because that still means that you have a qualifying medical diagnosis. So that letter that you will get back from Social Security will state, this child or this person has a qualifying medical condition but doesn't meet the financial income. That letter can be very helpful if you're applying for waivers, applying for grants, or applying for secondary insurance. That letter is a very helpful document, so just make sure to keep that on file. Next slide, please. Okay, and 2 other options for saving if you're receiving SSI or you have Medicaid. So I have to talk about ABLE accounts. I can't stop talking about them. They're such an amazing resource for our SMA community. Special Needs Trusts, which you'll also see on the screen, are still in existence and are still a way that you can set up finances for a loved one. Managing this property is called the trustee. So you have to assign a trustee to manage the trust. With an ABLE account, which, as you see, it stands for Achieving a Better Life Experience, ABLE accounts are self-directed, meaning that our patients with SMA can actually direct their own finances, which are tax-advantaged saving plans, and any individual with a disability can qualify. Every state has an ABLE account either active or in the works. So you can look up, if you look up after we're done, your state and the words ABLE account, your state's ABLE website will likely pop up and it will show you how to enroll. If you just want an example, PA ABLE just redid their whole website and it's really helpful. They have a whole brochure explaining it. The reason why ABLE accounts are so awesome is that you can contribute a specific amount of money into an ABLE account every year, and it cannot count against your Medicaid or your Social Security, which means that more of our patients with SMA and other neuromuscular diseases can work and can do other things out in the community that create revenue and income, and not be fearful that they're going to lose their benefits, or that they're not going to lose their benefits or their Social Security income. Now, there are thresholds, and every state's threshold is a little different. I believe, if I'm quoting correctly, I think the threshold for PA is you can submit 14 grand a year and then a max of 100 grand over a lifetime. So there are caps in every state, and you'll want to look into that. But it's definitely an amazing option for our patients with SMA who can direct their own finances. Okay, next slide. Okay, most important takeaway. I told you guys I was going to pack you with information. I hope it wasn't too much. Insurance is complicated, period, end of story. There is no course for this in school. Ask as many questions as you have to. I'm so sorry. There we go. Stay informed. Make sure you advocate for yourself. Be creative when problem solving, and truly enlist the help of others, whether that's the medical team or the community. And thank you to my amazing neuromuscular team. I love my job so much because of all of our amazing neuromuscular families and everyone I get to work with. So thank you, and I'm happy to answer questions if we have time.
We got a question that came in, but you actually answered it
Okay.
during your presentation. So I did not get anything else. That
Okay.
was a lot of information, I do know.
So much, I know, I know.
So
thankfully,
thank you.
I'm a gifted fast talker, so I was like, I think I got this. I can squeeze in one or two more slides, but it's really complicated, and I think it's always important when the MDA kind of breaks out and has a talk like this, because this is the stuff that they don't teach you in, neuromuscular 101. It's a really complicated system.
It is, and I think our families have a lot to navigate with insurance, especially our SMA families. So
yes,
thank you very much. We appreciate your time this afternoon.